Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Ryan, also known as Rezial, and today we are going to start round 2 of Rez versus the Contemptor Achillus Dreadnought. Round 1 was building, round 2 is painting. That's the good stuff, getting all the colors and greatness in there. This is not a how-to guide per se, you can do it however you want. This is just my take on doing one in a scheme for someone that has some specific needs here. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we left off last time with the building process finished. I've got all my parts here ready to go into my sub-assembly for the painting process. And we're gonna get to the spray booth. Gonna use my Badger Patriot. Gonna thin out my paints with the mixtures of water, flow improver, and airbrush thinner throughout the process. And I'm also gonna start off with the prime, which I'm going to use Rez Gloss Black, which is a primer that I've had great success with, and I like to do for using when I'm going to spray metallics, especially like a lot of metallics. I go with Gloss Black. And you can see here we've got it nice and thin, and I'm just going to go evenly over the parts. And I'm going to go with a nice solid coat evenly over each part. I'm going to do this for each part, and at the end, I'm actually using my hairdryer to speed it up a little bit. You can see I'm going to get that dry, and it's going to come off with a nice shine. It's not going to be a matte finish, it's going to be a shiny finish that will help our metallics. And so I'm also going to show part of the process here on the body of the model, because you get kind of a little bit better look at the stages I'm going to do it. I'm going to go in nice thin passes across, and then I'm going to build that up over time so that it gets better coverage. And this, I'm actually going to get more coverage on the parts as I go here, doing this top part of the top of the model here to also give a look at how I spray some of the parts that are on the skewers that I use with the blue tack. I'm going to cover more of the model here than I would with some primers because I want that gloss black everywhere. Going back in now for a second coat. One of the tricks with this gloss black is even when it's not, or even when it is dry, it looks like it might not be dry because it's glossy. but this is it all dry after all the coats and covered, and it is still quite shiny. But that gives us a great base for our metallics. It makes them really pop out really well with nice rich contrast and show up really well. And this is basically all the parts on skewers finished. We're gonna switch over to our gold recipe, which is a combination of two scale 75 metallics, and I'm going to use my Extreme Patriot with a little bit more control there. I'm going to start going in nice and thin, first with scale 75 Necro Gold. So this is a nice darker gold. You can use it for any type of gold that you want to start off with, or brass or bronze. You can do that. And you can like tweak the colors and do different things, but again, kind of similar to the priming. We're just going to go in nice and thin and get good coverage. You don't have to do a ton of coats of this. And I'm also going to put that on all of these skewer parts, these sub-assembly parts, and also these pauldrons. These pauldrons are going to have a little bit different process a little bit later on, but I wanted to go ahead and put that gold on there nice and clean, especially for some of the details on here, but I am going to go back and do something a little different with those shortly. Now I'm going to go in with now my mid-tone gold, and that is scale 75 Elven Gold, and then I'm going to start hitting just highlight points. This is not exactly a zenithal highlight, it's more of like a spot highlight closer to the front, not exactly on the top, because metallics work slightly differently. Doing that all over, and then we go in with Citrine, which is the highlight gold that they have. It's like a higher brightness, and that one's gonna take that to the very next level. Just gonna add little tiny bits of highlights on top of the Elven Gold as well. Gonna do that all over the model. Going through these real nice and quick. Just assume I'm going across the model, all the parts with that. And you see here kind of how that turns out at the end, where we're doing that all over the front, and also higher points on the back as well. Now moving on, I need to do some work on the base. So I'm going to do the earth tone and some Vallejo monocolored chocolate browns. Just a good, it's a little bright, but it's not too bright. It's kind of a medium brown. Thinning it down using like a bigger brush. I use a lot of cheap synthetic brushes, and just getting that all over the ground parts of the model. and just covering over it where I need to. It doesn't take that long, dries pretty quickly, and it get a little bit messy on the base, but that's okay. I'll go back and clean that up later. And then I'm going to go in on my sort of concrete there and using Mechanicus Standard Gray from GW. Very similar process, just a lot less to paint. And going to go in and cover those parts with that. And after that's done, we've got our base sort of blocked in. It's going to be a very simple base. So also, now we're going on to another big stage. Contrast Black Legion. It's one of my all-time favorite GW paints. It's not even been out that long, but it's great for doing all sorts of things that you need to be black. If you need it to be black, Contrast Black Legion is the way. I know a lot of people still like Black Templar. I also still like Black Templar, but if I had to pick one, it would be Black Legion. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a lot of the joints on this model in that Black Legion. It's really good for painting any metallics over that I need. It also helps me do a base for things like cabling and hoses and stuff like that. Anything that I want black, and basically get that done off screen, done that on all the other parts that you don't see. They'll go on later where I need black. And so now for masking, I use Silly Putty quite often. I'm going to need to mask these pauldrons because where I painted them gold earlier, most of the pauldron's not going to be gold, just some of the details. So I'm going to go ahead and use that Silly Putty to cover the parts that I don't want sprayed again, because I'm going to go in with the airbrush. And the Silly Putty is good because it doesn't stick strongly to the model, but it does stick to itself. And I'm going to use this little wooden skewer to get it tight in on the details there, because that won't really mess with my paint too much, and it helps me get it pushed in and all tight to the spots I need it. And then we end up with something a little bit like that. Getting them back on the bamboo skewers, I'm going to go with green. That's what this model calls for. I'm going to go in with Vallejo Game Air. I think it's dark green. It's a lot like GW's Caliban green or Dark Angels. And I'm just going to go in nice and thin, cover that all over the pauldron where the cover, or where the color needs to be. A lot of times you'd see on Custodies this would be red, but in this case it would be green. And of course I like to use a hairdryer to speed that up a little bit. Hairdryer is a great tool for everybody. And this is kind of what that comes out looking like. I'm going to end up needing to spray it a couple times to get solid coats. But it looks really nice. It's very rich. I like that green. So that's a cool thing. And I don't even mind that it's going over gold, but because it looks still pretty cool. Now I'm going to use some Warpstone Glow as the primary brighter green, and I'm just going to add that into the dark green to kind of get a transition between the two and not get the full brighter green. And based on where the shoulder is going to be angled, that's where I'm setting the highlight on, so that it's a bit of a forced lighting in there. And you basically get that done on both. Now it's different spots on the pauldrons depending on how they're being angled, but that's how it goes. Now I'm going to go to some Scorpina green is what it's called by Vallejo. It's basically scorpion green, or like moot green for GW. And that's going to be a further highlight on top of that mid-tone. And then I realized I needed some more contrast, so I put the dark green back in, and I'm going to go and shade after I've done the highlight. I'm just going to fade around a little bit. This is not going to take much work, but you'll start to see it'll put in more contrast on the highlights and the shadows of the greens. Doing that on both sides. This particular one, pauldron, has more shadow on it, more highlight, more shadow. This is a little bit more extreme angle on the left arm. Now, when you actually go to remove your Silly Putty, the magic starts to show through, because you get like this nice masking effect. And it's just easy. It's like one of the quickest, easiest ways to mask parts, and it comes out looking pretty clean. You can go back and clean up any mistakes or anything like that real easy with simple brush strokes and stuff like that. No big deal at all. Get to keep our nice gold. Now we're going on to Celestra Gray from GW to paint the eyes on the head, because that's kind of the next stage before I start putting the model together. Is getting that head finished, or at least up to a certain, get all those details done, and that's going to be the base for the eyes. And then I'm going to go in with some golden high flow white. There's lots of whites you can use, like whatever you're happy with. It's kind of closer to an ink maybe, but it's still an acrylic. I'm just going to brighten that up. Just be real deliberate. Brighten that that gray up so that we get a nice white base in the eyes, because the technique I'm going to use is then to shade or to tint this with De La Rowney ink, fluorescent red ink. I just go in real light and do light coats of this, and I will build that ink up a little bit into the eyes, and did a couple different coats, I believe. Gets us where we need to go. And then finally the details on the head, I'm going to start with Vallejo Metal Color Duraluminum, which is a good, it's not super bright. It's a little bit above steel. I'm also going to go around the rest of the model, and I'm actually going to test out. There's some parts that really look like they should be metal. There's other parts you'll see me here, I'm just going around the model, kind of like feeling out where I want them, and testing and just putting in some duraluminum. Just different pieces as I go, kind of moving all over the model and adding them here and there. And I love those Vallejo metal colors. They are so, so good. I can't recommend them enough. You can see they go on really smooth, even just on brush. And here I've done pretty much all the metal parts on that body. And then, of course, I'm gonna go around the other parts that I don't have shown there. Here I'm gonna use some Vallejo Model Color Gunmetal and an old dry brush that just happens to be nice and small. And I'm gonna go over a lot of these black parts to give them a little bit more visual interest. It's a real quick way to just kind of add a bit of visual interest to a lot of these black parts, so that it doesn't look like, it's just not painted black. It looks like maybe it's a bit of a metallic there. You can see it really good there. Hopefully we're starting to add it on. Pretty much all of those black parts around most of the model and model parts, I'm going to add that too. And we get that nice and dry brushed in. And now it's time to super glue on a lot of our parts here. So we're going to get the hands put in, starting with our Dread Spear, which is one of the big points of this model. Really, really nice. Really love that weapon. And then also our right hand, which is kind of like the casual offhand. He gets to sit up in there. And then finally, I'll be putting together the head finally. Get that set in where I want it. And he's going to sit just like so, kind of looking off to his right just a tad. And then I will, after I've cleaned up some of where the paint was, so you get a better connection. You don't want to be gluing paint to paint because it's easier to come off. You can see I've scraped it off those parts. It's real easy. Those were flat parts. Just adding the super glue in there, trying to keep it as light as I can, but also coverage. And then that piece sets, it rests in there, and then it goes on. And then we're all covered. Now I've moved on to my golds again. So because I need to do some edge highlighting, and there's plenty of other highlights as well, but I'm going in with that citrine, the Citrine Alchemy from Scale 75, and I'm giving a lot of the parts an edge highlight. And that's going to really help. Also some of these these sort of upward facing flat panels like on the eagle and stuff like that, going around the model and adding all of those little touches starts to sell that metallic look, especially like on all these corner edges. A lot of those with metallics get it. And then I wanted to start dulling down the base and making it uniform. I've gone through a couple of steps here. First would be Nuln Oil, and then I'm going back in with Agrax Earthshade. If you do a combo of these, you get like a bit of a dark and dirty look. It can kind of be nice to do that. Now I picked up something from Mr. Richard Gray on some of his painting tutorials about getting some really thinned in brush strokes and texturing, and I'm doing it here with the darks and the dark green. I'm sort of mixing it up, going in and sort of almost like tinting and shading a bit. It's a combination of like layering and that, because it's a transition between. I'm also cleaning up some of the spots where I didn't get the best job masking, and that was actually a tiny bit. Then I'm also going back in with some of those greens, same greens I used in the airbrush stage, and doing some specific highlighting and texturing. The paint is so thin that there is no physical texturing that you see. It is not like that, but you get this like illusion of texturing to like the painted section. So it's a neat little highlight trick. I'm not a master of it, nowhere close to Richard Gray. You need to go check his out, but I do really like this technique. And then I'm just bringing it up. I'm going back to that Escorpina green, and I'm wanting to punch in some more of that color. Especially the model is so much gold that having that green, putting a little extra work, hand work into that is going to go a long way to bringing it up. And again, I know kind of where my light source is going to hit because I've dry fit the parts on the model off and on over and over again. And so there he is with those parts attached back, the gold details put back on. And so now it's time to give us a gloss varnish over everything that we've got because of the stage it's going to follow. So like I said, I've gone back in, I've done things like jewels and gems and metal detailing, and I've done a lot of paint touch-up work and all that. Obviously all the model parts are together except for the guns that go on the arms and things like that. And after that gloss varnish stage, he's super shiny after that's fully dried, and he looks quite good because you get a lot of nice contrast when your stuff is glossed. So I really do like that. I'm gonna play around with the varnishes here some more in a bit, but as you can see, I also got the metal on the blade. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna go in with an oil wash, and I'm gonna use some Winsor & Newton white spirit, and I'm gonna go between one of my two, either lamp black and burnt umbers, and I'm gonna use a very old synthetic Citadel brush and one of my little metal dishes here, and we're gonna mix up the oil wash. And the oil wash is something that's a little tricky. You need to kind of mess with it as far as like consistency, because if you don't have enough oil paint in there, your pigments will separate and it'll look a little grainy and spotty. So you really need a little bit more. I'm gonna start off doing it on the base because I definitely want to test out my oil wash, and then I'm moving down the parts of the model. And after that gloss varnish, the capillary action will suck a lot of the oil wash into all the recesses pretty well. I didn't always get the best result on that capillary action on this model in every case with this one, but you can see it kind of pouring through like those vents there, and as I go around the rivets, I'm basically just trying to do a controlled wash of the whole model. And in a couple of cases, I've had to go back in and maybe do more brown or add more black, but I'm going in there, and you can see where the oil wash is getting into the recesses and kind of hanging out there. And that will give us some very nice noticeable shading. And you can see too, there's going to be some staining that is on the model, but I am going to be able to go back in and clean that up. Either wipe it off. Oil takes a little while to dry. It's not a super quick drying thing. I can either wipe it back off with a finger or a Q-tip or something like that, but once that goes on, you start to get a real amount of like rich contrast in the model. And I've basically gone over everywhere that has any type of like line recess or crevice or whatever, and everything gets it. I gave it quite a bit of time to dry before I went back in and started painting, and now I'm adding some more highlighting. Still mostly using citrine alchemy, but also there's some Vallejo model color or metal color gold here and there. And now this is, I like to take AK varnishes and mix them, so because the ultra matte is very, very matte. So what I did was I mixed some satin up and did that first. And then I have gone in and one of the last things I really have to do is I wanted to test out a power effect on this blade. So I'm gonna use some contrast aethermatic blue, which a lot of people do for glows and things. I'm just gonna very thinly paint it on in layers of this blade. Just build it up. You can even see there's still a bit of dirt on the blade. I left that as an experiment. It's from the oil wash, and it kind of gave a pretty cool effect by the end. So this aethermatic blue is going to build up on top of that and on top of the cleaner parts of the brighter metal, and it's just going to look really interesting. It doesn't quite look like a power weapon effect. It looks more like a fantasy metal or something. That's how I kind of take it. And yeah, it's just been a real fun process and test. And so really kind of dig that blue. Decided I need to go back in with another layer yet again. It's not quite even as far as like the sides, and I was wanting to make sure there wasn't any tide marks. And you're always just trying to get as much of the pigment to flow and rest in the directions that you want. So most of it will collect at the end of your brush stroke. And so I'm just moving the brush up and down and going the directions I feel like it needs it most. Giving it time to dry in between. Went back and did some edge highlighting on that blade with the silver. And now it's basically time to throw down pigments. What I want to do, I wanted this to be a little bit down and dirty, a little bit dirty, like Battlefield looking model. And so I was like, well, I've got to use pigments, and throwing down the pigments on the base was really nice. It's also a good way you put it down around the feet of the model as well, and it really ties the model into the base. And so that's a thing that I did there. Basically got it to about that stage, and then that pretty much takes me back on to varnishing again. So this is an even more deliberate mix of satin and matte, because I'm trying to keep the top end of the model a little bit glossy so that you keep the majority of your metallic, but I want some other parts of it very matte, especially around the base. So I've actually deliberately done it in a couple spots. And that is him. That is the Achillus, pretty much in all his glory. The owner is going to, of course, add a couple of details to the base himself, so match the rest of his army. One of the reasons I kept it really simple. You get a little close-up there, get a look at some of the details and the eyes and things and how that turned out. I had a great time doing this model. It was definitely a fun project and well worth making a video on, I think. I hope you guys got some great value out of it. Like I said, not a tutorial, just more of how I wanted to do this particular one. If you have any questions or suggestions, please put them down in the comments below. That is it. Bye for now.